Charlotte Evans sat on the edge of a plush ivory chaise in the sunlit conservatory of the Blackwood estate, her hand gently resting on the soft swell of her belly. The early morning light poured through the glass walls, casting a golden hue on the orchids Damien had arranged for her the day before. It was moments like this, quiet, perfect, suspended in time, that convinced her she was living a life most women only dreamed of. Married to Damien Blackwood, one of London's most influential billionaires, and now carrying their first child, Charlotte often found herself overwhelmed with gratitude. Their whirlwind romance had been the kind fairy tales were made of: a chance encounter at a gallery, an instant connection, and within a year, a grand wedding that made headlines. Charlotte, with her graceful presence and gentle wit, had been the ideal complement to Damien's magnetic confidence and strategic brilliance. Their mansion in the countryside was sprawling and exquisite, with rooms she still hadn't fully explored. The nursery was already being decorated in soft creams and forest greens. Damien had even flown in a renowned interior designer from Paris to ensure every corner of the room reflected elegance and love. He had insisted that their child would have the best of everything, just like Charlotte. He spoiled her with weekly spa treatments, private chefs, and jewel-toned gowns that embraced her growing figure. Friends envied her. Magazines celebrated her. Even the staff often exchanged whispers about how devoted Mr. Blackwood was to his wife. And yet, Charlotte couldn't ignore the small shadows that had begun creeping into their perfect picture. Damien, once constantly by her side, had started pulling away with increasing frequency. At first, it was just a meeting here, a quick trip there. But now, he was gone for days, sometimes weeks, claiming business was pulling him across Europe. He still left sweet notes and sent extravagant gifts, diamond earrings from Milan, silk robes from Tokyo, but his absence lingered longer than his tokens. When she asked about his trips, he smiled with that polished ease she had once found so comforting and kissed her forehead. "All for us, darling," he would say. "Everything I do is for you and the baby." Charlotte wanted to believe him. She needed to believe him. She would sit up in bed, cradling her belly, whispering to the child growing inside her about how lucky they both were. But sometimes, when the house fell too quiet, and the shadows outside her window grew too long, doubt crept in like a draft under a locked door. She tried to shake it off, reminding herself of how far they had come. Damien was just busy. That's all. He was building a legacy, for their future. Still, in the pit of her stomach, a quiet intuition stirred. She silenced it with hopeful smiles and soft lullabies, determined to preserve the fairy tale. After all, everything still looked perfect from the outside. And Charlotte had always been taught that some things were worth holding together, even when the cracks began to show. It began with whispers, soft ones, short ones, never meant for her ears. Charlotte noticed them first one evening while walking down the hallway toward the library, her footsteps muted by the thick Persian rug. Damien stood by the window, back to her, his voice low and urgent on the phone. The moment she entered, he ended the call with an abrupt "I'll handle it" and turned to her with a smile so polished it felt manufactured. He claimed it was a call from the Hong Kong investors, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes. Guilt? Panic? She couldn't be sure, and she didn't want to jump to conclusions. Still, the seed had been planted. In the days that followed, more small signs surfaced. His phone, once left charging on the nightstand or casually tossed onto the kitchen island, was now glued to his side or locked behind a thumbprint. The screen dimmed automatically after just a few seconds. When she'd asked him about it with a teasing smile, "Hiding something from me, Mr. Blackwood?" He'd laughed it off and claimed increased security for company emails. "You know how brutal leaks can be," he said, ruffling her hair. But the laugh hadn't reached his eyes. Then came the scent. Charlotte's nose had grown more sensitive since entering her third trimester, and when Damien kissed her goodnight one evening, she detected a faint floral note she didn't recognize. It was too bold, too exotic to be anything she owned. She dismissed it at first, blaming a colleague's cologne or the air freshener from one of his many hotel stays. But the next morning, the scent lingered faintly on the collar of his crisp white shirt, and this time it clung with a stubbornness that set her nerves alight. She buried the shirt in the laundry basket and told herself not to spiral. Still, a quiet unease had taken root, wrapping itself around her thoughts like ivy. The final nudge came when Damien left his briefcase on the entryway bench, something he rarely did. She wasn't snooping, at least that's what she told herself as she walked past it, paused, and then circled back. The edge of a receipt poked out from the inner pocket. It wasn't the fancy restaurant or the bottle of champagne that made her stomach churn, it was the date. The very night he'd told her he was having dinner with a client 2 hours north. He hadn't been at a conference room table in some sterile office park. He had been celebrating. That afternoon, Charlotte called Lydia. Her hands trembled slightly as she held the phone, but her voice remained calm. Lydia had been her best friend since university, a woman with a sharp tongue and a sharper instinct for reading people. When Charlotte began sharing the odd details, the phone, the perfume, the lie about dinner, Lydia didn't gasp or rush to conclusions. She listened intently, her silence encouraging more than any words could. When Charlotte finished, there was a long pause before Lydia finally spoke. "I don't want to scare you, Char. But something's off. You know it. Trust your gut. You're not crazy." Charlotte felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, not from sadness, but from the relief of being heard. "What do I do?" she asked quietly. Lydia didn't hesitate. "You don't accuse him, not yet. You watch. You gather. If he's hiding something, you'll find it. And when you do, you won't just know, you'll have proof." That night, Charlotte lay in bed while Damien snored softly beside her. Her hands rested protectively over her belly as she stared at the ceiling, wide awake. For the first time since their marriage began, she was no longer just Charlotte the wife, she was Charlotte the investigator. The whispers weren't in her head. Something was wrong. And she was going to find out exactly what. Charlotte had always believed that facing the truth, no matter how painful, was better than living in doubt. But as the days grew heavier and Damien's absences stretched longer, her growing suspicion turned into a suffocating weight. The kind of weight she couldn't ignore anymore. She could no longer pretend that his evasive smiles, mysterious calls, and sudden weekend business trips were harmless. There was something sinister lying just beneath the surface of their perfect life. When Lydia suggested hiring a private investigator, Charlotte initially hesitated. The idea felt extreme, even paranoid. But the quiet ache in her chest, the one that kept her awake at night, insisted she needed answers. Real ones. So she met the investigator, Martin Lane, at a discreet office tucked behind a row of antique shops in West London. He was calm, experienced, and professional. After their brief meeting, she handed over Damien's travel schedules, a few suspicious receipts, and the photo of the perfume-stained shirt. "I just want the truth," she said, her voice steady even as her heart raced. Days turned into a week. Every time her phone buzzed, Charlotte's heart skipped. When the call finally came, she was folding baby clothes in the nursery, tiny white onesies and pastel-colored socks. Martin's tone was neutral but clipped. "You'll want to see this in person." The envelope he gave her was thick, filled with photographs, timestamps, and printed screenshots. She sat alone in her study and slowly opened the file. The first image showed Damien exiting a luxury car in Paris, not with his assistant or a colleague, but with a woman Charlotte didn't recognize. Tall, blonde, and impossibly stylish, she clung to Damien's arm as if she belonged there. With shaking hands, Charlotte flipped through photo after photo, the pair dining in an exclusive rooftop restaurant, laughing intimately during a gondola ride in Venice, holding hands on a private beach in the Maldives. What cut deepest was the date stamped on one particular image, March 18th. That was the same week Charlotte had been hospitalized for severe back pain and early contractions. Damien had claimed he was locked in back-to-back meetings in Berlin and couldn't catch a flight back in time. But now she saw the truth. While she was alone in a sterile hospital room, fearing for their baby's life, Damien was sipping champagne with another woman beneath a tropical sunset. Martin had included a background report as well. Her name was Vanessa Cole. 26 years old. A rising social media influencer with 1 million followers, known for her luxury fashion hauls and curated lifestyle photos. She had recently signed with a high-profile brand management agency and was frequently seen attending galas, art shows, and fashion weeks. She was beautiful, seductive, and 10 years younger than Charlotte. Her Instagram was full of indirect hints, cryptic captions, glimpses of Damien's yacht, a hand that looked just like his resting on her thigh. As the pieces fell into place, Charlotte sat frozen, each breath a battle. Her heart thudded like it was trying to escape the confines of her ribcage. This wasn't just an affair. It was a betrayal on a level so deep it threatened to unmake everything she believed about her marriage. The man who had sworn to protect her, who had promised a forever built on love and trust, had left her emotionally abandoned while chasing a fantasy. And now, she had proof, undeniable, soul-crushing proof. Her hands curled into fists as tears slid silently down her cheeks. In that moment, the dream shattered. Everything Damien had said, every gift, every promise, became tainted. She wasn't just hurt. She was heartbroken. She wasn't just betrayed. She was changed. Charlotte waited until dinner was over, her mind rehearsing the words she would say as she picked at her food. Damien sat across the candlelit table, swirling a glass of red wine and talking about a potential merger in Singapore, completely unaware of the storm building in her eyes. She had spent the entire day staring at the photographs Martin had given her, memorizing every detail, his hand on Vanessa's back, his smile reserved only for her, their bodies too close to be anything but lovers. Charlotte had always been composed, but tonight her calm was razor-sharp. After dessert was cleared, she placed her napkin on the table and met his gaze. "I know about her," she said quietly. Damien paused, the wine glass hovering near his lips. "Know about who?" he asked, brows furrowed in confusion that looked practiced. "Vanessa," she replied, voice steady. "I know you've been seeing her. I've seen the photos." There was a brief silence, just long enough for her heart to pound in her ears, before Damien leaned back in his chair and let out a hollow laugh. "Charlotte, love, what are you talking about?" She didn't flinch. "Don't play dumb. You were in Venice. You were in Paris. While I was in the hospital, you were with her." His face darkened, but not with guilt, with annoyance. "Who told you this?" "Lydia," he snapped. "Did she get in your head again? This is exactly why I didn't want her around. She's always stirring things up." Charlotte stood her ground. "A private investigator told me. I have pictures. Dates. Receipts." Damien stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "You're pregnant, Charlotte. You've been under a lot of stress. Hormones can make you paranoid. Emotional." His voice softened, as if she were a child being consoled. "I understand, really, but you've been imagining things. Vanessa is just a business contact. We've had some events, that's all. You're reading too much into it." Charlotte's breath caught, not because his words made her doubt herself, but because she recognized the tactic. Gaslighting. Dismissal. Twisting her reality into something fragile and untrustworthy. "Stop," she said firmly. "Don't make this about my hormones or my mental state. This isn't in my head, Damien. This is real. And you're lying." He rubbed his temples and sighed. "I can't believe this. I'm working myself into the ground for our family, and now you're accusing me of cheating based on some photos taken out of context?" He moved closer, his voice low and coaxing. "I love you. You know that. Don't let your imagination destroy what we've built." Charlotte felt her chest tighten, not from sadness, but from the clarity washing over her. He wasn't going to confess. He wasn't going to apologize. He was going to twist, deny, and deflect until the truth was buried under layers of well-practiced charm. For a moment, the weight of it all crushed her, but only for a moment. She straightened her back, nodded once, and walked away from the table, her silence speaking louder than any threat. As she climbed the stairs, Damien called after her, "You'll see I'm right eventually." But she didn't turn around. Because for the first time in weeks, she wasn't confused. She wasn't defeated. She was done giving him the benefit of the doubt. Charlotte sat curled up on the sofa, her legs tucked under a throw blanket, sipping chamomile tea that had long gone cold. The confrontation with Damien had left her exhausted, but more than that, it left her aware. No more pretending. No more waiting for him to come clean. She had to know everything now, every ugly truth. Across from her, Lydia scrolled through her phone with the intensity of someone chasing the last puzzle piece. She'd been digging for days, clicking through influencer circles, encrypted hashtags, and anonymous gossip forums. Vanessa was careful with what she posted publicly, but Lydia knew how to read between lines, and behind locked profiles. Then she stopped scrolling. Her thumb froze mid-swipe. "Oh my God," she whispered, eyes wide as she turned her phone toward Charlotte. "Look at this." It was a grainy, quickly deleted video, already screen-recorded by a gossip page and uploaded with a timestamp. In it, Vanessa stood in front of a shimmering rose-gold balloon display that read "Future Mrs. B." A diamond the size of a marble flashed on her hand as she held up a flute of champagne. Laughter echoed, someone cheered to the bride-to-be. And in the background, Damien's unmistakable voice said, "To us." Charlotte felt like the air had been knocked from her chest. "Did she just tag him?" she asked, leaning closer. Lydia nodded grimly. "Yes. Not under his name, though. She used an alias, D.Blackridge88. But the profile links back to his private travel Instagram. It's him. He's using a fake name." The bile rose in Charlotte's throat. "So he's not just cheating, he's planning a wedding?" Lydia nodded again. "And keeping it out of the press. Private guest list. No media. Everything's being done hush-hush. But the location's tagged in one of the guests' stories, Blackwell Manor. That's the old countryside estate near Surrey, the one celebrities rent out for destination events. The wedding's in 1 week." Charlotte blinked. 1 week. 7 days. She felt her heart pounding against her ribcage, thudding louder with every passing second. Damien wasn't just being unfaithful, he was trying to erase her, to replace her while she still carried his child. The magnitude of it hit her like a train. He had no intention of ending things quietly. He wanted a brand new life with Vanessa, shiny, youthful, and unburdened by responsibility. Her baby was nothing more than collateral damage. Lydia's voice cut through her spiraling thoughts. "Char, listen to me. We can't just sit here. He thinks he's going to get away with this. He's counting on you to stay quiet. But you're not going to, are you?" Charlotte stared at the flickering video, Vanessa's laugh echoing faintly through the speaker, and made her decision. She wasn't going to scream. She wasn't going to beg. She was going to plan. She had 1 week. 1 week to stop the biggest lie of her life from being sealed with a kiss. The betrayal cut deep, but Charlotte knew that raw emotion alone wouldn't win this war. Damien had always been calculated, careful, and dangerously persuasive. He thrived on charm and control, bending narratives until the truth was barely recognizable. If she stormed into his secret wedding with accusations alone, he'd twist it into hysteria, blame her pregnancy hormones again, call her a scorned wife, or worse, unhinged. No. This time, she needed evidence so irrefutable that even he couldn't deny it. Cold, scientific, undeniable truth. And that's when the idea struck her, DNA. If she could prove that Damien was the biological father of her unborn child before the wedding took place, it would obliterate his narrative. No more "we've been separated," no more "she's delusional." Just facts. Public, legal, and damning. The next morning, Charlotte reached out to her solicitor, someone she hadn't contacted in months. She met with him discreetly in a small office tucked behind a medical building, her coat pulled tightly around her belly despite the summer warmth. The solicitor listened quietly as she laid out her plan, then nodded slowly. "There is a way," he said, choosing his words carefully. "It's called non-invasive prenatal paternity testing. It uses a simple blood sample from the mother and a cheek swab from the alleged father. It's accurate, legal, and can be used in court. Charlotte sat up straighter. How soon can we get results? 3 to 5 days, he replied. Maybe faster with a rush order. That gave her just enough time. But there was a catch: getting Damien's DNA. He would never consent willingly, not with a wedding looming. She didn't need permission, though. She needed access. And Damien was careless in his arrogance. That evening, when he stopped by the estate to collect a few documents before heading out of town, Charlotte played her part flawlessly. She greeted him with a calm smile, offered him tea, and asked him about his meetings as if nothing had happened between them. He relaxed, mistaking her quiet for surrender. When he stepped into the downstairs bathroom, she moved fast, slipping into his briefcase and retrieving a used tissue he had carelessly stuffed inside. DNA, right there in her hand. The next day, Charlotte submitted both her blood sample and the tissue to the lab her solicitor had arranged. It felt surreal, signing official documents while her unborn baby kicked gently inside her. "You're helping me fight," she whispered, placing a hand on her stomach. "We're doing this together." There was a risk, of course. The emotional toll. The legal maneuvering. And if, for some reason, the test got delayed, she would have to confront Damien without it. But she pushed the doubt aside. She wasn't the same woman who had cried over vacation photos and perfume-stained shirts. She was a mother now, a protector. And she was done being afraid. Over the next few days, Charlotte waited with growing anticipation. She didn't stay idle. She gathered the rest of her evidence: Martin's full report, Vanessa's social posts, and screenshots of the fake profile Damien had used. Everything was labeled, dated, and organized. By the time the lab called to confirm that the results would be delivered within 48 hours, she was ready. In just a few days, Damien would stand in front of his mistress and vow to start a new life. And in that moment, Charlotte would stand too, with truth in her hand, her child in her belly, and justice ready to speak. The morning of the wedding dawned with an eerie calm. Charlotte stood in front of her mirror, fastening the buttons of her pale blue trench coat, her expression unreadable. Beneath the elegant fabric, her baby bump was gently concealed, allowing her to move freely without drawing suspicion. Her hair was softly curled, makeup tastefully done, and in her hand she clutched a cream envelope sealed with a red wax stamp. Inside it was the DNA report, the final nail in Damien Blackwood's gilded coffin. Outside, Lydia waited in the car, engine running. "Last chance to change your mind," she said, eyes searching Charlotte's face. "Not a chance," Charlotte replied, sliding into the passenger seat. "He wants to start a new life today. I'm going to make sure he remembers exactly who he left behind to do it." The countryside was breathtaking, lush green fields rolling out for miles around the secluded Blackwell Manor. The estate, a grand Georgian structure covered in climbing roses and shimmering white drapes, looked more like a royal venue than a secret wedding hideaway. Guests were dressed in pastels and pearls, sipping champagne under the marquee. A string quartet played softly in the distance. Charlotte remained calm as she and Lydia entered through the side garden, blending in just long enough to not raise alarm. They waited until the moment arrived, when the ceremony music began, when the guests were asked to take their seats, when Vanessa stepped forward in a silk ivory gown, her veil fluttering behind her like a proud flag of victory. Charlotte stepped out from the shadows. Whispers rippled through the crowd like a rising tide. Heads turned. Some guests gasped. Others stared in stunned confusion. Vanessa's face drained of color the moment she locked eyes with Charlotte. Her hands clenched around her bouquet, and her lips parted in horror. Damien, already standing at the altar, froze. His eyes widened, and his posture stiffened as if he'd seen a ghost. But Charlotte wasn't a ghost. She was real, alive, breathing, and carrying the child he had tried to erase. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She simply walked, slowly, purposefully, down the center aisle, her heels clicking against the stone path as every pair of eyes followed her. the quartet faltered, the music falling silent as tension suffocated the air. Damien stepped forward, hands raised as if to stop her. "Charlotte, what the hell are you doing?" he hissed, voice sharp and low. She said nothing. Instead, she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out the sealed envelope. "This isn't a protest," she said calmly, her voice carrying across the seated guests. "I'm not here to stop your wedding. I'm here to deliver something, truth." She held out the envelope to Damien, who hesitated before taking it, his fingers trembling. "Open it," she said. "Read it out loud." Vanessa took a step back, her face now pale as porcelain. Damien looked around at the watching guests, then back at Charlotte. "This is not the time or place," he muttered, panic rising in his throat. Charlotte raised a brow. "If you're not ashamed of what you're doing, then there's nothing to hide." Damien had always known how to perform under pressure. But now, the weight of the truth pressed against him like iron chains. Slowly, he broke the seal and unfolded the papers inside. He scanned the first page. His lips parted slightly. Then he found the sentence that mattered: probability of paternity, 99.99%. His jaw clenched. Gasps erupted from the guests. Someone dropped a champagne flute. Vanessa looked like she might faint. Charlotte didn't flinch. "I thought your guests should know," she said, her eyes locked on Damien. "That the woman you tried to replace is carrying your child. And the only reason you're here today is because you thought you could hide that." Damien tried to speak, but no words came out. Vanessa turned toward him with fire in her eyes. "You told me she was infertile," she snapped, voice rising. "You said she was out of your life." Charlotte turned then, walking slowly back down the aisle, head held high. She had said what needed to be said. The truth had been delivered. And as she passed the stunned guests, she realized something vital: this wasn't a collapse. This was a reckoning. The envelope trembled in Damien's hand, its weight suddenly unbearable. He stared at it like it might explode, lips parted, heart hammering against the tailored fabric of his designer suit. Around him, silence had swallowed the elegant garden ceremony whole. The guests, investors, socialites, business moguls, watched in a stunned hush. Vanessa stood motionless at the altar, clutching her bouquet so tightly that the petals began to crumple beneath her fingers. Charlotte stood across from him, calm and poised, her coat still buttoned neatly over her stomach, the very image of grace under fire. "Go on," Charlotte said, her voice cool but commanding. "Read it aloud, Damien." He blinked. "Charlotte, this is not the..." "Read it aloud." Her voice sliced through the air like a blade, sharp enough to still any murmuring from the crowd. His gaze flicked to Vanessa, whose wide eyes silently screamed at him not to. But he knew there was no way out. Not now. Not with the entire guest list staring at him. Slowly, with shaking hands, Damien unfolded the crisp sheet of paper and cleared his throat. "Paternity analysis report," he read, voice dry. "DNA sample comparison between Damien Blackwood and the fetus of Charlotte Evans Blackwood." He hesitated, throat catching. His hand trembled, the edges of the paper flapping in the breeze. Charlotte didn't break eye contact. Vanessa took a step forward, whispering harshly, "Stop. Don't do this. You don't owe her anything." But Charlotte was no longer the woman who needed Damien to validate her worth. She already had all she needed. "Finish it," she said. Damien swallowed hard, eyes scanning the decisive line again. Probability of paternity, 99.99%. The words hung in the air, impossibly loud. Someone in the back gasped. Another guest covered her mouth. Even the string quartet, still frozen on their instruments, shifted uncomfortably. Charlotte didn't smile. She didn't need to. Her silence said everything. The truth had been spoken. The facade shattered. Vanessa looked like she'd been slapped. "You told me she was lying," she hissed, stepping away from the altar. "You said she was just some clinger, some bitter ex trying to ruin your life." Damien opened his mouth to respond, but no sound came. He had spent months weaving lies, manipulating two women for his own convenience, and now it had all unraveled in a matter of seconds. "I was in the hospital," Charlotte said, her voice stronger now. "Carrying your child, barely able to walk. You told me you were in Berlin. But you were in the Maldives with her. While I was scared I might lose our baby, you were on a yacht, sipping cocktails and posting under a fake name." Vanessa turned to him, the realization dawning like a tidal wave. "You used me," she said, breathless. "You said she was crazy. You said she couldn't have children. You said," her voice cracked. Damien tried to reach for her, but she stepped away. "Don't," she snapped. "Don't touch me." Charlotte looked around the garden one last time. She saw the stunned faces of the guests, powerful people now bearing witness to Damien's downfall. She nodded once, then turned to leave. No dramatics. No begging. Just truth, and the crushing silence it left behind. Damien stood frozen at the altar, still clutching the DNA report, the paper trembling as badly as his hands. His wedding day had become a courtroom. His lies had become his prison. And Charlotte, calm, elegant, and undefeated, had just walked out the victor. The silence that followed Charlotte's exit was thick, until it cracked under the sharp thud of Vanessa's bouquet slamming into the ground. "You lied to me," she screeched, her voice ricocheting off the stone walls of the countryside estate. Guests flinched. Damien winced. Vanessa stormed down the aisle in stilettos far too sharp for her now wobbling composure. "You said she was infertile. You said she was obsessed and delusional. And divorced, Damien, divorced." Damien opened his mouth, but all that came out was a weak, "Vanessa, please." She spun on him, fury blazing. "Please? Please? You told me she was just a clingy ex trying to sabotage your future. Meanwhile, she's carrying it." She pointed dramatically at Charlotte's retreating figure, then back at Damien. "Your child." Someone in the front row, a hedge fund heiress, no doubt, stifled a laugh behind her gloved hand. A camera clicked. The event photographer, unsure whether to keep documenting or hide in the bushes, froze mid-shot. Vanessa turned her wrath toward the guests. "Are you all enjoying this? Is this fun for you? Because this is my wedding." Her voice cracked as she grabbed a nearby centerpiece and hurled it into a champagne tower. Glass shattered. Gasps erupted. One man in a tux muttered, "This is better than Netflix." "Oh, I bet you're all thrilled this went viral," Vanessa spat, mascara streaking down her cheeks. "What's the hashtag now? Hashtag bastard baby Blackwood? Hashtag runaway wife?" She let out a deranged laugh. "I'll bet one of you leaked this to Dumois already." Someone in the back cleared their throat awkwardly. Without another word, Vanessa kicked off her heels, lifted the hem of her couture gown, and stomped down the aisle barefoot. As she passed Damien, she hurled one final insult: "You are dead to me, and your trust fund better be, too." 3 hours later, clips of the chaos were already trending. Fake billionaire wedding ends in DNA drama hit every gossip account from LA to Milan. Vanessa's follower count plummeted by 30K overnight. Brands pulled out of partnerships. One guest even posted a TikTok reenactment, complete with a fake DNA envelope and sound effects. The bride didn't just lose the groom. She lost her crown. The headlines spread like wildfire. DNA bombshell at billionaire's secret wedding. From tech tycoon to tabloid tragedy, Damien Blackwood's empire crumbles. By morning, Damien's carefully curated life was in freefall. The press had a field day. Video clips of Charlotte's interruption and Vanessa's meltdown went viral. News anchors debated it like it was election coverage. Hashtags like hashtag Blackwood baby scandal and hashtag read it aloud Damien trended for days. Damien's company, Blackwood Innovations, saw its stock plummet within hours. Investors panicked, pulling out before the brand could be further tarnished. Board members issued statements distancing themselves from personal matters affecting the founder. One insider leaked that several high-level partners were already exploring severance clauses. Meanwhile, Charlotte moved with grace and quiet precision. Her legal team filed for divorce within 48 hours of the incident, armed with footage, witness statements, and the damning DNA results. The public, already rooting for her, rallied behind the pregnant woman who had been lied to, cheated on, and publicly gaslit. Even tabloids shifted tone, referring to Charlotte as the resilient heiress. Within weeks, the court awarded her 40% of Damien's total assets, citing emotional distress, infidelity, and defamation. She also received primary custody rights and full control of the baby's public image, effectively barring Damien from using their child in any press stunts or damage control. Charlotte didn't gloat. She didn't post cryptic messages or take interviews. She simply won, in full view of the world. And Damien? He was left alone in a penthouse filled with silence and legal notices. His fiancée gone. His fortune halved. His empire crumbling under the weight of his own deceit. Justice, swift and unforgiving, had finally arrived. Months passed with quiet resilience. The storm that had once threatened to drown Charlotte in heartbreak gradually gave way to a calm, steady light. In a softly lit hospital room filled with fresh flowers and gentle sunlight, Charlotte held her newborn daughter for the very first time. Tiny fingers curled around hers, and tears of relief and joy welled in her eyes. She named her baby Hope, a symbol of new beginnings, strength, and the promise of brighter days ahead. In that moment, all the pain, betrayal, and sleepless nights seemed to dissolve into the purest love she had ever known. Lydia never left her side. Through late-night feedings, endless diaper changes, and moments when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her, Lydia was the steady presence that reminded Charlotte she was never alone. Their friendship deepened in ways neither had anticipated, forged through shared tears and laughter in the quiet hours. Lydia often joked that if Charlotte could survive Damien Blackwood, she could survive anything. And Charlotte smiled, knowing that while the past had tested her, her future was hers to shape. As the weeks turned into months, Charlotte found a new purpose beyond motherhood. She launched a podcast dedicated to women who had been betrayed, broken, and silenced, but refused to be defeated. Through heartfelt conversations, expert interviews, and stories of resilience, she created a space where others could find strength in vulnerability. The response was overwhelming. Messages poured in from listeners across the globe, thanking her for giving voice to pain so many had hidden in silence. Charlotte's life was no longer defined by Damien's lies or Vanessa's betrayal. It was defined by courage, healing, and the unwavering bond between a mother and her daughter. Hope grew healthy and strong, her laughter filling the once empty rooms of the Blackwood estate with light and life. In every challenge, Charlotte discovered her power. In every scar, she found a story worth telling. And in every sunrise, a chance to begin again, stronger, wiser, and surrounded by love. My dearest Hope. As I hold you close tonight, the world feels still. Your breath, soft against my skin, reminds me that even after the most violent storms, there can be peace. One day, you'll grow curious about where you came from, what we've been through, and why your story began not in a fairy tale, but in the ashes of one. This letter is for that day. Before you were born, I thought I had it all. I believed in love, in promises whispered late at night, in the man I thought would protect our family. But your father, Damien, chose deceit. He built a life behind my back, another woman, another ring, a house of lies stacked so high they eventually crumbled under their own weight. I discovered the truth when you were growing inside me. And I had to decide, would I fight for clarity, for justice, for us? Or would I let his betrayal define our future? I chose to fight. You gave me courage when I had none left. With you growing beneath my heart, I faced every accusation, every humiliation. I stood in front of a room full of strangers and demanded the truth be heard. And when the truth came out, it didn't just expose him, it freed me. I learned that silence only serves the one who lies. But a voice, steady and brave, can reclaim everything. There were moments when I wanted to collapse. But I didn't. Because I knew you were coming. I knew the world you would enter had to be one where your mother had already learned how to stand tall. Now, I look at you, and I don't see pain. I see a beginning. I see laughter that hasn't yet been shared, dreams that haven't yet taken form. I see someone who will grow up knowing her worth, her strength, and her voice. You will know what love is, because I will show you, every day. Never settle for a love that hides in the shadows. Real love doesn't lie, doesn't run, doesn't make you feel small. Real love stands beside you, in light and truth. And if ever you doubt yourself, come back to this letter. Let it remind you that your story began with fire, but it never burned you. It shaped you. It made you unstoppable. One day you'll ask why your father wasn't there. I'll tell you he chose a lie. But I chose you. With all my heart. Mom.